How hard should players train? Welcome back to Streetball Strategies.
Look, talking like they know me, they don't know the half. I'm like Owen Hart, mixed inside a Noah's Ark. I had battles in the dark, why you so alarmed? See the battles and the scars, had to go to class.
Now this seems like a pretty obvious question, right? If you were to ask the average player, how hard should you train? That player is usually going to say you should train as hard as you possibly can, obviously. And if all we were ever doing was training, I would be inclined to agree with you. But because we're players and we measure ourselves through competition, I would hope that your ultimate goal and objective would be performance out here at the court. So when it comes to training intensity, let's talk about where you should be at to optimize that goal. In my 30 years of basketball experience, there seems to be two major paths that serious players go down when it comes to their training intensity. And I know there are players that are somewhere in between these two, but these two seem to be the main paths that players seem to go down when it comes to their training intensity. One is the players who they train when they're younger, they train at the beginning of their career, and then at some point they decide that's enough. It's good enough training for them at that point in their career, and then they stop training altogether, or maybe they train a little bit here and there, and then they save their bodies for actual competition. And then you have the other extreme, which is the players who train every day. They go all out in their training every day, and then they try to bring it in game time during competition all out as well. And each of these have their pros and cons, and I happen to fall into the path of the all-out player. And it's not really a choice that I made, it's just based on my ingrained personality of being an all or nothing kind of person. I didn't really have a choice but to train and play all out all the time. And the pros of that are that because you are constantly pushing yourself and trying to find your limit, it is possible that you could have a higher peak to the prime of your playing career than you would have otherwise if you weren't constantly pushing yourself. But the universal, no exception con to training this way is that you will probably significantly shorten your career by doing this, simply because your body can't sustain that. And it doesn't have anything to do with how young you are or how great shape you're in or how much of a great natural athlete you are. It doesn't have anything to do with your muscles or your heart or your lungs, not even your mind. It's just about the wear and tear that you put on your joints and your tendons. Training all out, playing all out all the time, your tendons and joints cannot take that beating year after year and keep recovering as much as you would like them to do. And through that process, you're going to shorten the span of your career, probably significantly. Now, as far as the other extreme, the other path of barely training or not training at all, but trying to bring it as hard as you can in game, in competition, the pros to that are that you're saving your body, right? You're saving your tendons and your joints. So you're not putting the wear and tear on your body that you would be. And so you probably have a longer lifespan for your career. And when you go into competition, you're probably fresher than you would be otherwise if you were continually pushing yourself in training. The con of this, however, is number one, you're probably not in as good of shape as you could be to perform as well as you could out on the court. And also, how do you know? How do you know that you're playing up to your potential when you're pushing yourself in competition? How do you know you've reached your limits and your ceiling? How do you know you've pushed through? How do you know when you're on the other side of doing so? Because when you're a beginner player, just like when you're a beginner trainer or weightlifter, measuring your success and your progress is pretty easy because you're constantly reaching new personal bests, right? If you're lifting weights, you're doing a bench press, maybe it's hard to bench press 20 pounds, but you keep working at it, and before you know it, you're doing 30, 35, 50 and you keep hitting those new personal records. Same thing out here on the court. You keep gaining skills and abilities and getting better and better when you're a beginner. However, as you progress, as you become moderate and advanced, those records, those milestones become harder and harder to not only attain, but also to notice and recognize. Because now, like when you're training and lifting weights, instead of, raising how much you can lift by 10, 5 pounds increments, now you're doing it by a pound, 2 pounds, here and there, every few months. Same principle out on the court. Once you're an advanced player, usually, when you're working your way up through the ranks, you would measure how well you're playing by how much are you winning. But when you become a moderate player, and especially an advanced player, winning isn't a problem anymore. Once you're advanced, you expect yourself to win. And it's not a question of, are you going to win or not? Yes, you are going to win, but now that you're advanced, it's about how efficiently did you get those wins. That's much harder to measure than actual wins and losses. And if you're not used to pushing yourself in the gym or while you're training and getting yourself used to that feeling of getting yourself to your limit, to your ceiling, and then pushing through and then knowing that you've done that, if you don't do that, it's harder to recognize that on the court. The less you push yourself in training and get to that ceiling and push through, the less you are aware and experienced with doing so, the less familiar you're going to be with that experience off the court, the harder it's going to be for you to recognize that experience when it happens on the court. So what do I recommend when it comes to general training intensity? And remember, this is coming from someone who went all out all the time and stupidly and mistakenly ran myself into the ground, ran my body into the ground, and ended up having to retire way sooner than I should have had to retire. Let's say your game day for out here at the park is on Saturdays. I would say that during the week leading up to that game day, you should train moderately. What I mean by moderately is you should push yourself without exhausting yourself. And then if you have an off season like we do here in Michigan in the winter, then in the off season, that's when you push yourself in training, find your ceiling, push through, see what you're capable of doing. But if you don't have an off season, or if you are in season and you find yourself having to address a certain flaw in your game that needs to be dealt with directly and intensely right now to fix something, in that case, I suggest that you train hard, push yourself at the beginning of the week, like Monday and Tuesday, and then from like midweek, Wednesday on, you train moderately to prepare yourself for competition on Saturday. And make sure you also get adequate rest and recovery in the meantime. Don't neglect the rest and recovery component, because your training, no matter how hard you train, it does not matter if you don't adequately rest and recover from that training. It's not the training that counts, that matters. That the intensity that you put into that training is not going to pay off if you don't rest in order to recover from that training. The recovery is what makes you better, not only the training. So regardless of how hard or not you train during the week leading up to your game day, make sure your priority, even maybe more so than your actual training, should be how well are you recovered in order to participate and compete in that game day. In conclusion, be smart. Keep your priorities and your goals in mind. The goal should be performance out here on the court in competition. Everything you do in training is in preparation to have peak performance out here at the park. Choose your spots, choose your times, choose when you should push yourself at times when it's not going to negatively affect you out here on the court, and choose when you should go moderate intensity so that you're prepared for the intense competition that's going to take place out here on your game days. So thank you guys for watching. If you found this video helpful, a thumbs up would be great. Also, hit that subscribe button. Make sure you hit the button, subscribe to the channel. At this time in this channel's lifespan, the best thing you can do to help me to support the channel is to subscribe. And to all of you that do, know that I truly do appreciate it. And make sure you hit that notification bell so that you never miss any of my new videos when they go live. So thank you guys again, and I will see you next week.
Who's playing games wanna play it safe? I'm setting pace for the younger man to imitate while you hesitate. I ain't had a pad or pen, but since I'm in a place, never had a plan to span. But let me set a plate, demonstrate at a better rate. It's begun, gotta set them straight. We ain't never late. Is you done? Had to meditate, get my head away from the slums. Let me predicate. This is for the weight and the sun.